Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. So I'm Andrew. I'm one of the tech leads on Eve, and I'm here with Casey, our other tech lead on Eve. So yeah, we've been building the agent framework for the past 4 months or so. Got a chance to release it to the world a few weeks ago at Ship London, and trying to refine it quite a bit since then and give you guys a pretty full demo. Has anyone actually tried Eve yet before coming to today? Ship? A few of us? Okay, cool. So yeah, we will kind of give you like the full run through here. And you can follow along if you want. It could be a little bit difficult, so there's interactive portions to it, and I'll let you know where to kind of like jump in. But I wouldn't worry too much about trying to code along with me right now. You can kind of just see what we're doing here. So yeah, first things first, we're just going to get started on the command line and just jump straight into what an Eve application actually looks like. So let's build a new Eve app. Of course, we're just starting with our npx init command here. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. And this is basically going to scaffold the most basic Eve application that we can have. And when this is done, I'm going to show you kind of like what the directory structure looks like and what you get basically out of the box when you actually start using Eve. Okay, so I'm actually going to stop there. So before we even move any further, I actually just want to go straight into the directory and show you what this looks like. Alrighty, so yes, you get an agent directory. That is kind of the pitch of Eve. We are doing declarative file system based agents, and by default, an agent can literally just be an instructions file and nothing else. And so if we continue our setup here, obviously, if you want to talk to a model, you need to authenticate with something. So we're going to go ahead and start Eve Dev, and this is going to walk us through basically the setup process to get connected to whatever model provider you want. Of course, today we will use AI Gateway, which is Vercel's premier gateway product, and we're going to obviously be deploying to Vercel as well. But you can certainly connect with your own keys, and you can bring your own providers. We'll open up things like Codex subscription soon and things like that. But for today, we're just going to go ahead and actually connect to a Vercel project. I'm going to use my team. And so what this is doing is it just created a Vercel project for me, and it's basically just authenticating my local state with our gateway. And at this point, you can actually just start talking to your agent. And effectively what you have here is you have ChatGPT in a box. So we just a full agent inside of Vercel. It doesn't really do much, but it does have quite a few things built out of the box. So we can ask things like, who won the 2026 NBA Finals? And you'll see here it should invoke web search. So you get a ton of obvious harness type features that you should never have to configure, right? These types of things need to just kind of work. So obviously I'm talking my command line. This isn't very, very useful now, but now let's actually put it in the cloud and talk to it through Slack. So Eve has this concept called channels. And so channels is basically the topmost layer of how you talk to your agent. What you're seeing here is kind of the default HTTP channel that lives behind the scenes, but inside of your businesses, we obviously need something more interesting than that. So let's go ahead and connect to Slack. And now you're seeing this is where we're really starting to blend kind of features of the framework and the Vercel platform side of things. So here we're actually using Vercel Connect, and we're going to go ahead and connect this to a Slack workspace. So I already have one configured here. It's called Ship NYC. Okay, and I can close this window. And now we actually need to deploy it. So you can see it's immediately prompting me here. Let's go ahead and deploy it. And while that's going, if you feel like it, you can join this Slack channel and we'll be able to interact with the agent in real time. So it's bit.ly/eve-nyc if you don't want to scan the QR code, but you can just jump in. Let me see if this is done. Okay, so we deployed it here, and if I actually open up this Slack channel, which I have here, and maybe it's easier if I do it. So we should be able to tag ship NYC, which now actually shows up in here. So I can say hello, add them to the channel, and you will see that it's going to, it'll start talking with us. So if you guys jump in, you can all tag it. And you'll see we try and do things in here where you'll notice that like Slack is going to be presenting things differently than say the terminal. So if we come in here and do the same thing, you know, who won the 2026 NBA Finals? So you can kind of see that we're doing a lot of stuff for you out of the box. So in the Slack context, you can see, oh geez, okay. Of course, classic demos. But in the Slack context, we're gonna do things like show you the thinking indicators and what tool calls are being made and stuff like that. So depending on whatever channel you're operating in, we're trying to do a lot of stuff for you. So you don't have to recreate all this like default UI yourself. Okay, so now we need to, I would like to show you a few things so you can actually see what's going on here. And I want you to actually see what this actually looks like inside of Vercel itself. Of course, I have way too many projects here. All right, and so actually, yeah, let's actually see what this looks like, because we should be able to debug this. So we'll actually see what failed. It looks like a tool call actually failed. So here's the message that I just sent if I were to open up this run. So yeah, you can actually see here that we're giving you this observability out of the box for these agents. So every time someone sends a message or interacts with it, we can jump into here and we can see, you know, what happens. So in this case, it looks like it attempted to load some sort of skill and something broke here. So maybe we have to debug, you know, what actually happened with our skill setup. So let's try it again. Okay, very annoying. Classic demos. Okay, but let's keep going, and hopefully we can get past to something more interesting. So again, out of the box, we haven't really connected anything, right? What's the point if you actually deploy an Eve agent and you don't have any data? So let's go ahead and actually integrate some data with our agent. And I'm going to grab. So this is just an OpenAPI spec, but this could be a Postgres database. It could be wherever you guys are keeping your data. You can hopefully be able to connect these things pretty easily. And I want to actually just go ahead and switch over to a coding agent now. So let's go into ship NYC, and I'm going to open up OpenCode. And I'm just going to tell it to add an open API connection. And so it's doing something somewhat interesting here. So if you actually look at the calls that it actually made, if you notice, it immediately knew to go inside of Node modules Eve docs. So something that we do to make building Eve agents very performant and reliable is we're actually shipping special docs inside of the package for you. So it understands this concept of a connection, which is a first-class primitive in Eve. And if we actually just go back to our editor here, so you'll see it went ahead and it added this new other file. And so it also understood it needs to configure a username of some sort. It's able to import first-class API from Eve for OpenAPI connections. And if we actually go back to our agent, hopefully this works. Let's say, what's the weather in NYC? And so now you can see it basically used the connection right away. So you can see that it made this connection search tool call. It's looking up coordinates. And now it's immediately connected to that OpenAPI spec. And so again, this could be any data source that you guys have. But yeah, so that's kind of the idea around connections. And now let's make it a little bit more interesting. So let's say update your instructions to be an NYC city expert. Cool. So made those changes. Let's just check, say, who are you? And there you go. So yeah, basically everything just kind of updates in real time. And now let's just go ahead and redeploy this. And let's go back to Slack. And there you go. So yeah, in a few seconds, you're basically deploying your agent to the cloud and kind of updating stuff in real time. So I want to stop there because this is basically like the most basic demo I could possibly give. Is there any places that you guys want to dive into? I'm prepared to go build stuff in real time here if you want to see certain things. So yeah, if you have questions, if there's anything up to this point, if something's not making sense, we should go into, would love to jump in.
Hey, how's it going? Curious if you could show us like how implementing an external data store would look like. So you mentioned you can use any database. How about a NoSQL one?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see if I could actually have one. So obviously it's not going to be able to connect to one, but and maybe what I'll talk about for a second too is like there's this concept of tools and then connections. And so what I just showed you are connections, which are basically a special kind of tool. So a tool would just be a one-to-one mapping. So let's prompt this and I'll show you one of our other examples that does use Mongo actually, but let's say, let's add a stub MongoDB query tool and assume mvars are set. So I'm gonna let that go, but I'm actually just gonna pull up another project that has this. Okay, so one of the concepts, again, in this declarative framework is you can just go drop tools into a tools folder. And so that is exactly what I did here. We have a MongoDB, I have two tools, one called query and one called mutate. And I'll show you why they're separate in a second. But this literally looks, sorry, this is very large font. And there's a lot of code here, but effectively all you're doing is inside of the tool call, you can go import any Node.js library you want. We also have, you can interact with sandboxes and things like that. But yeah, adding some external data store is effectively, connecting to that store the way you would in any other backend application. And then it's kind of on you to design what the right query patterns are. So the reason I actually have these separated is if you look at mutate, it requires approval. So mutate will never run unless a human is put in the loop to go approve that mutation. So it's very, very easy to do things like this, and we can do like a very contrived example. But again, this comes down to like what some of the actual built-in tools are. So let's say, let's test your question tool. Ask me a question. And I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to do the same thing over here. So yeah, so in the tool you have here, basically questions are going to look a certain way. And then over in Slack, you'll see you get a very, you'll get like a more like native experience inside Slack. So channels, they basically kind of own their presentation and you get a lot of stuff, again, just kind of out of the box that kind of works in that surface. So So yeah, so approvals, they would very similarly flow through this same UI.
So I guess I'm going first. So I'm testing 1, 2, 3. I'm using Eve right now. One of my things to learn, because Vercel's been just shipping just random kind of cool new products, is how it works with connectors, voice, or WebSocket.
Yeah.
Because right now, when it comes to connectors, you have stuff like Composio. When it comes to WebSockets, you have stuff like LiveKit. Voice, you have stuff like LiveKit. For WebSockets, you can do something like PartyKit from Cloudflare. And so all of those are areas that I have experience in. And I'm just wondering, like, it would be nice to go all native, especially because Eve can probably integrate these things together.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about those type of workflows, especially connectors, because it's unmature yet compared to Composio that might have like thousands of connectors. And let me get my thoughts together here. They already have a workflow of building these API connections and triggers in advance versus us having to customly tool these things together. So I'm just wondering if that's in the pipeline also, and how that all could work to go completely native.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a few different components to this. So one, I would say the lower level APIs in Eve exist, so these coding agents can go build that thing. So if we let me pop back over here. Okay, yeah. So presumably finished like this MongoDB example. Yeah, so you have your MongoDB tool. So now, let's just prompt it and say, I'm building a new real-time channel that must use WebSockets. Build this new channel with basic debounce messaging. So this is like pretty complex. So we've actually done voice demos on Vercel, which recently shipped WebSocket support. So WebSockets are also built into Eve. Like this is like a channel primitive that I think this is going to go figure out and probably come up with something somewhat reasonable to have a WebSocket channel to communicate over instead of regular HTTP. But yeah, let's see what it actually does. So we'll let that keep going. But so that's like the low level primitives. Then there's the Vercel Connect team, which is technically separate from Eve. And they've already shipped things like Linear, Slack, GitHub, and so they're going to keep kind of adding to that surface area, right? Like at the end of the day, if you can't invoke the agent from wherever your business is, it doesn't really matter. So yeah, so they're taking up a lot of that on their own.
How are you building a feedback loop? So how do you improve the agent over time? How are you getting that? You guys are building UIs, so like the SDR agent, you're getting approvals from the human using it, and then how does that feed back into the agent?
Yeah, great question. So one of the first class features in the framework is Evals, which I think is kind of the start. Right? You need to, if you're going to be seriously iterating on an agent inside of your business, you need to understand, what is the current state of the world, and as we start making changes, what is the newer state of the world? So let's open up another window here. So let's say write an eval testing when someone asks about the weather, it responds with New York City. And so, while this goes, the other thing that I actually want to show you is and this is public on our GitHub. If you actually look at our test suite, so our test suite is built on evals. So the entire E framework is tested against our own set of evals that we run. And so if we were to look at these, we have a ton of like primitive ones, things like testing sub-agents and human in the loop and things like that. But the idea is you should also be able to go send these evals out to providers like Braintrust or any other OTel provider that exists. So if we pull up one of these, so yeah, this is like a very basic one. And then if I actually show you what these look like, so this one is. Oh, actually, wait, let's just see what it wrote. Okay, yeah, so this is our this is our eval API. Like you literally get to just interact with the agent in the same way that you would, if you were to go test this on the CLI, right? Like you'd probably make some changes and then go type in prompts and then see what the response is, right? But obviously, if you want to automate that, we're basically giving you API to do that. And this is, you have deterministic checks, right? So things like literally, does it include the word NYC or whatever? But then we also have this concept of LLM as judge. So you can get really advanced evals that are actually, checking semantic meaning, things like that. So. And so, yeah, this is where I would start. And, and then from there, I think it's obviously you have to maintain these things and keep building on them. But yeah, I think evals are critical for actually iterating on this stuff.
I have a question about how you use different UI SDKs across different channels, and like how do you present different data viz on those channels?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm not prepared to show off Next.js today, but Next.js is like obviously a very first-class citizen with Eve, and our other framework teams are also supporting Eve heavily. So maybe we can actually just pull up the docs. Maybe that's actually easier. But yeah, we're shipping front-end tools. Things like use Eve agent, for example, is kind of like the primary surface for interacting with Next.js. And I think I wonder what do you know the World Cup demo that someone built? I forgot the name. Yeah, maybe we'll have to look it up. But yeah, there's been some really, really cool like Next.js demos that people have built. And then we also have quite a few of the other frameworks actually supported too. Things like Svelte, Nux, Next are obviously all supported.
Yeah, I was just going to ask on that out-of-the-box Slack behavior. Is there controls on what the agent can do or not do in the Slack channel, or how do you were invoking it directly, but what if there's like a group message? Like how does it know what to do?
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and this is always going to be a balance of like what the right defaults are. So there's ways to control these things. Like you might decide to disable DMs. You might say that in certain channels, only these people can message those. Ultimately, that just comes down to code. So we can limit those types of things, and we could say, let's just say, disable Slack DMs. And if we look at the actual file, oh, okay, yeah. And so here's the real-time channel too, by the way. I'm obviously not going to read it, but yeah, it did figure out what the right WebSocket API is and even used it. So yeah, this is the default Slack channel. There's nothing in here, and so you're basically getting things like DMs, mentions, and yeah. So there you go. So there is progressive API to go control a lot of these things. So this would be a very simple way to go disable direct messages. But you can imagine like this is just a function. You could look up, you could take the Slack username and look up something in your identity provider and say, maybe they have certain permission to do something or not.
Is this on? Yeah. So the one thing I'll add as well is the channel contract. The agent does not have direct access to call Slack out of the box when you add a Slack channel. The channel contract is essentially a mechanism to define where the agent outputs how they render, essentially, in Slack. So there's nothing that the agent won't just go post in a random channel because it doesn't have a Slack tool. It's just you're defining essentially a deterministic contract with agent events to how they should flow into Slack, and vice versa.
So I'm curious so I see that you guys have connections with, like, you can connect to MongoDB and establish and write logic within the tool. But how do you guys handle use cases that aren't deterministic? Like, is it possible to handle a use case where it can cross-reference multiple connections, but you don't have specific logic written or like specific tools written for those cases?
Yeah, this is a really good question. So I will give you my 2 cents on this, and then I'll kind of tell you like where I think we might end up going. I'm of the opinion that, and this was a kind of a guiding principle for Eve very early on. I think these models are very much intelligent, And I think if you describe what you want, they're only going to get better at following those instructions. Now, with that said, that's not good enough for everyone. I think there is really interesting concepts, kind of similar to what you saw with Evals, how like we're doing steps one at a time. We're looking at this idea of like a workflow where it kind of mixes running agentic calls with predetermined output, and you could kind of control what that looks like. I don't have a good example to show you, but something that is built into Eve is this concept of an output schema. So when you talk to the agent, obviously everything I've done right now is we're just getting text responses back. But we ship a TypeScript SDK, and then there's also this concept called like sub-agents where you can say, give me temperature number, and so you get more of this deterministic behavior, even though you're running, obviously non-deterministic LLM. So yeah, there's like little bits and pieces that can give you a bit of determinism back, where you need it. I think workflows would kind of take this to the next level, but I'm more of the opinion that you don't necessarily need them. And like, we didn't even talk about skills here, but like an obvious thing, just try first, and then obviously eval it, is write a skill that says, do this, then this, then this. And I think especially with these frontier models, like you'll be very pleased with the results of actually just writing a skill in plain English.
Hi, so just to preface, I haven't actually set up Eve yet or like Claude tags, but from what I'm seeing and from what I'm reading, I think the similarities are that you guys both integrate your agents with Slack and other third parties. So what are some of the differences? Okay,
so the biggest difference, I would think of tag today as like a single binary. It's effectively the same for everyone. You're deploying tag one thing into your Slack workspace. And their model is they're doing a much heavier like self-evolution, like memory type of story where they're kind of taking in and saving memories that you guys are asking inside your channel. And then that's ultimately, feeding their feedback loop, right? Eve would be able to do those things, and we have all the APIs to go make those things, but Eve is code first. Like Eve is very much about building the agent for your business. And you should be able to build tag on Eve, if that makes sense. And we have all the necessary APIs to do that. So everything you kind of seen here has been like more or less like single player, but there's a ton of multi-tenant APIs inside of Eve as well. So if we were to look at, we should have a whole section on this. Yeah, so actually, I literally have a guide here called multi-tenant memory. And this, again, is like a very advanced concept, but this is going to let you do things like actually define skills per invoking user or per user, right? You could have hundreds of thousands of users, each with their own skills, if you can save those in a DB, and Eve will kind of give you the different ways to go query those things and update them. So yeah, I would not be shocked if we do an open source tag on Eve, would be my guess.
Hi. What's your philosophy on message persistence, particularly when different channels might have different expectations on who owns that?
Yeah, great question. So right now we actually we're not exposing a storage adapter at all. So if you our persistence engine is workflows is what we're using under the hood. So our Workflow SDK. This is like a hot concept, and like a lot of people are going to want to save their messages. Eve on its own has this concept of sessions and streams. And so there is nothing stopping me from opening up these sessions on a website and resuming and just immediately starting to talk to it. I would show you how to, I can't pull up the Vercel internal Slack, but that's exactly what we do. So our data agent, for example, 90% of the invocations are in Slack, and we append a little open in web button, and you can immediately just go resume the sessions in web too. So yeah, the sessions themselves are channel agnostic, and the channels can kind of decide, what gets presented where, but ultimately, any channel could resume any other session, as long as you have what we call this continuation token. Again, pretty lower level concept, but yeah, if you know what that token is, you can basically work across surface areas.
Hey, I'm wondering how extensible is I guess the harness around Eve itself. So can I make my own primitives and
Or if I want like specific things that are custom to me, is that just a folder that I create and with some necessary markdown files and scripts and whatever code that I need? Or like how extensible is that with Eve itself natively, I guess?
Yeah, great question. So yeah, we're obviously providing a bunch of harness features for you. So there's a bunch of default things, right? Things like read file, write file, web fetch, web search, glob, grep, all these things. So all of the default stuff that we give you, you can disable or replace with your own implementation if you wanted to. If you do that, again, I would suggest like heavily lean on the evals to make sure it's actually doing what you want. But yeah, most of our default harness features you can take advantage of. And then the other thing that we give you is this concept of hooks. So hooks you can basically plug into most of our harness events, right? So things like compaction or pre-tool calls, post-tool calls, things like that. So yeah, I think it's instead of swapping the harness, you probably want to build more so around it. But you could take advantage of most of our harness features and replace them if you want. Maybe in the future we might actually let you fully bring your own harness, like literally think run Eve on top of something like OpenCode or Pi. But yeah, for now we're basically kind of owning the harness internally. It's what allows us to do a lot of like these dynamic things and work across step boundaries and workflows and more of these other things that are pretty hard to do with these other harnesses that kind of expect to have a long-running process all the time. So yeah, maybe the other thing that's not obvious is our harness is fully serverless and stateless, aside from like what we take from workflow. And so it was pretty important to own the harness to be able to accomplish a lot of those goals.
Hey, in the back. I'm curious how you would suggest adding the ability for the agent to run long-running tasks, such as like maybe a code change.
Yeah, great question. So those types of things should work out of the box. We expect turns could take many hours if they had to on Eve. And the main way that that's accomplished is the way we dispatch functions under the hood. I think we actually do have a good reference for that. Maybe not. But yeah, so I'll try and describe it. But basically because our harness is completely stateless and we actually don't rely on a single server kind of running the harness all the time, we can basically dispatch at any point in the turn to another serverless function and pick up right where we left off. So you might be familiar with like the 15-minute timeout on serverless functions, and it's certainly reasonable that something would take longer than 15 minutes. And so what we can do is every time a tool call is made, we can actually just swap you over to a new function. And so all those types of things are kind of happening on Vercel by default. It's a little bit different in the self-hosting story, but yeah, on Vercel we're very much going out of our way to make sure that these things can run for a very long amount of time, and you don't have to think about it.
Hey, quick question. How do you use browser use with Eve or computer use?
Yeah, we don't at all today. I think there's probably an interesting concept there. The easiest thing is just you could literally pick your favorite provider and write the necessary tool calls to go interact with it. You could probably get something working with Vercel Sandbox as well to do it. Yeah, so the only built-in stuff we have is web fetch and web search, but I think it'd be pretty reasonable to plug into another provider for like a full like browser use experience.
Or you should ask them to write a tool with agent browser and sandbox.
Ooh, all right, that's risky. All right, so we'll see what it does here. Yeah, so this will kind of be our intro to sandboxes. So yeah, the other thing that we didn't cover yet is every single Vercel or Eve agent has a sandbox by default. On my computer, it's using Docker. On Vercel, it's obviously using Vercel Sandbox. And this is kind of like the backbone to a lot of these capabilities, right? It's able to grep for files, save things, stuff like that. So hopefully what it's going to do here is add a sandbox.ts file. What do we want to do? I don't know.
Agent-browser npm dependency.
And we'll take another question while this is going. We'll see what happens here.
I'm curious about like generative UI in terms of extensibility with AI loves JSON. So if you use like a Vercel JSON render where you have a catalog component system, is that something that we're looking to do for the future, where you can just have a connector, maybe bind it to a button that a generative UI could assemble together?
Yeah, I really want to find this World Cup example because that's exactly what they did. Is this it? Let's see. Yeah, so let's see what this does. So somebody on X just built this on Eve. And I think, yeah, so you can see like beautifully like rendered stuff that's coming just from the Eve stream. I have no idea how they did this, but it looks great.
Know that.
So in my mind now, there's two ways to go about creating agents in the Vercel ecosystem, through the AI SDK and now through Eve. Is there a preferred approach with using one over the other?
Yeah, really good question. So Eve is a layer on top of AI SDK, but like we use it heavily. So it really just comes down to like, do you want to go build durable agents and build your own harness and these types of things? And you might. The answer might be yes. So that's really what Eve is doing, is we're kind of taking, you know, the low-level primitives of AI SDK, and we're building a lot of like the really hard stuff on top of it, just so you don't have to think about it. But yeah, you know, you might not like the authoring experience of Eve if you don't want declarative file system agents and you want some different model. Then yeah, reaching for AI SDK makes perfect sense. We work with that team very, very closely. So you know, a lot of stuff that they did in V7, you know, that same day was all available in Eve as well. And so yeah, we'll definitely continue doing that.
Does it fully support ZDR?
What's that?
Does it fully support ZDR?
What?
Zero data retention?
Oh, that's an enterprise question. I would need, that's above my pay grade. I don't know.
What's the pricing on agent creation, or how do you guys price this?
It just uses our infra. So deploying an Eve agent costs nothing, again, because it's serverless, which is really nice. So if you don't use it, you do pay for nothing. But yeah, the main price points for Eve are going to be function CPU, function duration, sandbox usage, and then obviously 90% of the spend is going to be, you know, wherever your tokens come from, either Vercel or bring your own. But yeah, I will say Eve uses a lot of Vercel primitives when deployed to Vercel.
So you kind of mentioned that Eve is helpful when you're creating like a kind of harness for agents. So what I'm wondering on my end, as a much less technical person here, is where do you see use cases where it makes more sense to use something like Eve as compared to like a pre-built agent harness like OpenClaw or Hermes agent?
Yeah, for me, it just comes down to like, are you building for your business, and like where does your data live and how much control do you need, right? Like in these out-of-the-box harnesses, you're not going to be able to do things like look up users and make different decisions on, you know, depending on who they are. And like, so Eve is, you can build an entire agent in Markdown, but you can, every single Markdown file in Eve can be a TypeScript file, and you can eject and do whatever custom logic you want. So I think, like, you know, if you're actually serious about building, you know, for your business, and you need the utmost control over what's actually happening and how you connect to things, like that's, you know, Eve is kind of, yeah, it's like apples and oranges at that point, right? Like these out-of-the-box harnesses aren't going to give you a way to become programmatic on top of them the same way that you could on something like Eve. Yeah, so I was trying to describe that a bit before, but it's Workflows is the main primitive for that. So that's what's giving us the ability to have like good retry semantics. So when things fail, it should be retrying. It's how we can dispatch different functions like statelessly. So Workflow is the durable engine behind it. And then we're using Vercel's infra to effectively let it run for an infinite amount of time. But that doesn't change, you know, the self-hosting story is a bit different. So, you know, if you were to self-host this thing outside of Vercel, there's different things to consider. And we have a bunch of docs on how to do that as well. Yeah, I think we're good. All right.